Just to keep on schedule, this panel is called the Risk Managers Speak. I'm really pleased to have the folks up here talking. A lot of great experts. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Vinny Secor of ICSA Labs, our moderator, to start us off. Thanks, Vinny.
Thanks, Mark. I'll give folks a few seconds to cycle in and out. It's a pleasure being here. This is always a great event. It's a great opportunity to learn as well as an opportunity to just network and meet people. And so I just encourage everybody to kind of circle the rooms when we have cocktails and things like that, and just kind of meet people. I'm excited about this panel. This one's called the Risk Managers Speak, so I'm going to do my best to give as much time for our risk managers and Sarah to share. I'll just do some brief introductions, and then we'll dive into the topics. We spent a decent amount of time preparing, talking about what was interesting, what they're excited to share about, and this really is an opportunity for our panel here just to share what they do and how they do it. To my right, I have Dave Camerato. He's the Assistant Treasurer for Risk Management and Insurance for Verizon. He joined Verizon's Risk Management Group in January of 2004, and his present position is he's the head of Verizon's Risk Management Group. Next to David, we have Renee. Renee is the Senior Director of Risk Management for Kimpton Hotels and Restaurants. In this capacity, she's been employed with Kimpton since September of 2007. Her primary responsibilities include oversight of all property, casualty, and employment-related insurance, claims management, litigation management, employee and guest safety, and training. So she wears a lot of hats, and so there's a lot of opportunities that she'll have to share. Next to her, we have Eric Worth. He's from Microsoft. He holds an ARM designation. He has 15-plus years of experience in the insurance industry, and he's spent the last 10 years with Microsoft. His primary responsibility at Microsoft includes the development of risk financing, risk mitigation solutions for cloud services and software hardware products. And most recently, Eric's been involved in building insurance solutions to help drive closure of cloud service sales for Office 365 and Windows Azure. And last but not least, we have Sarah. Sarah's a member of Aon's professional risk team. It's a groundbreaking team that was created 10 years ago, made up of specialists from inside and outside the insurance industry, drawing from technology, law, insurance, and consulting. She advises clients across industries in the assessment of E&O, cyber, privacy, and media risks, as well as creation of optimal risk transfer solutions. So I think where we'd like to start is I'd like to just give Sarah an opportunity to just share with us, Sarah, some of the recent trends that you're seeing with your clients with respect to cyber.
Yeah, absolutely. Is this on? Okay. So I think what's interesting right now is that risk managers, especially in industries with a lot of PII or really obvious cyber risks, are starting to become a lot more sophisticated around the way that they manage these risks. And really starting to understand this is not an IT issue. This is a comprehensive risk management issue that I can't avoid being involved in. So I'm really going to try to dive in, learn about these risks. And what's cool about that is we're starting to see a lot of times in the process of procuring cyber insurance that our risk managers are having to interface and actually enjoying interfacing with a number of stakeholders internally. So beyond just talking with legal, which is probably a more comfortable sort of solution, but also talking with everyone in IT, a lot of times going through HR, compliance, et cetera, and really forging those relationships so that new risks come to the surface and get run by our risk managers. And then they can also be proactive about educating some of those folks around, hey, we may have an insurance solution in place. I've seen some of our risk managers actually get themselves implemented as part of the computer incident response team so that if there is a cyber insurance solution in place, they're sure to get notice in appropriately, to coordinate with outside vendors, and also try to get all of those other individuals within the organization on board with taking advantage of some of the risk control services that are provided on a proactive basis by their insurer, and really ultimately reducing their total cost of risk by taking advantage of those solutions. And so we're having a lot of deeper conversations with our clients around current exposure trends, whether it's social media, I need to talk to my marketing department, make sure that what they're doing is not going to dramatically increase our risk. And sometimes it's saying no, but a lot of times it's saying you can do this, but just do it in a thoughtful way. Talking about mobile devices, bring your own device, what does that mean for us? Thinking about cloud services, and I know this is close to Vinny's heart, and we'll be talking a little bit more about it later, but negotiating those contracts with cloud service providers, going beyond making sure the right type of contractual language is in place and requiring the right kind of insurance from those providers if you can get it, and if not, really looking to your own policy. And then having a lot of conversations that go beyond just the wrongful disclosure of PII and thinking about service interruptions or thinking about industry-specific issues. If we're talking to a utility, we're thinking about the catastrophic effects of an attack on the smart grid. If we're talking to Renee or someone else in the hospitality industry, we're thinking about that recent security vulnerability whereby hackers could open up hotel locks due to a software vulnerability with a dry erase marker and a battery pack, and thinking about what kind of consequences those issues can have way beyond a lawsuit that arises from a data breach. And so all of that, I think, has led to, especially when you're in the second or third or fourth or fifth year sometimes of buying cyber insurance, of taking a deeper look. So it's not just about checking a box and making sure we've got this other new line of coverage in place. It's really looking at that coverage in detail, and especially all the differentiated offerings that are out there with respect to incident response and the reimbursement for those breach costs and the different approaches, whether it's full service, almost outsource the response to your insurer, or a reimbursement approach. Really, we're seeing a lot of our risk managers dive into that and say, okay, we've got this coverage. It's not just that we need more sublimit for that. We really need to make sure that when we have an incident, because we know it will happen, when we have an incident, that everyone in the incident response team is on board with the vendors that we might be required to use. Maybe we go through a tabletop exercise. Maybe we've done some kind of rehearsals and we've actually met those people, taken advantage of some of the proactive breach coaching that's available in a lot of cases, and really evaluating the offering to make sure it matches reality and what we'd want to do. Obviously, though, we are always pushing for higher sublimits. That's, I think, one of the buying trends that we're seeing. Looking a lot at and I thought the last panel was really interesting, the discussion of the insurability of fines and penalties, because that's definitely been a frequent conversation. We can get coverage for fines and penalties levied by the FTC, and I think the answer is always maybe, we'll see, but we'll write the best language we can to give you the best chance for that. And a lot of our, especially kind of national account larger insureds, I think are starting to take higher self-insured retentions, in part because if you have those garden variety data incidents, a lot of times you want to be able to manage them yourselves without the involvement or necessarily the micromanagement sometimes of an insurer when it's not likely to be catastrophic. So setting retentions up higher so that you can have either no sublimits, full coverage, or just broader coverage once you actually get into the insurance is definitely another trend. Also thinking about vendor risk and going beyond, again, there's the evaluation of the contract with the vendor and thinking about indemnification. But I think what a lot of our clients are starting to run into is, especially in such a dynamically changing industry or exposure area as provision of technology services, media services, internet services, maybe you're hiring specialized small vendors to help you with your social media activities, or there's a specific type of mobile application that you want to develop for your clients. And a lot of times it's really small vendors, and there's a lot of pushback because you have a standard set of insurance requirements you want to push onto those vendors, but it's 2 or 3 guys in a basement and they say, we're tiny, we can't buy this insurance. As a risk manager, you think, I'm not comfortable that these guys can indemnify us. So what do you do then? And what we're seeing is some of our clients start to look at a plan B, sort of almost like a vendor wrap-up program like you'd see in a construction project, but putting together something that they can say, okay, yeah, I understand you can't buy insurance, but I have a solution that I've created for you. So I think it's just a really exciting time to be an engaged and kind of a risk manager who's really interested in diving into these risks that, frankly, we can't always avoid or engineer out of existence.
Yeah, it's definitely a fun market. I mean, I find myself in rooms where a lot of people ask the question, well, why are you here? And it's because technology is always changing. It changes risk profiles, and from year to year, a company's risk profile could change immensely due to technology. Let's give our risk managers a chance to chime in. So for our risk managers, I'd like you to briefly introduce your organization and then share with us what your organization's approach to corporate governance and risk management is and your strategy there. So Dave, why don't we start with you?
Okay. And Sarah, you're right on target. Everything you just said is exactly what we're going through at Verizon. In fact, I think you're on Verizon's account because, I mean, exactly what we're doing. The governance process is really a key process in terms of mitigating the risk at Verizon. We couldn't control this risk without it. We need senior level involvement. We need senior level commitment of resources and people to make sure that we're addressing all the different areas that we need to address. And I want to talk about and describe the process to you in two parts. And I think the first part is just as important as the second part. And it deals with communicating the message to the employee body. Our CEO, Lowell McAdam, firmly believes that one of his roles is to cultivate the culture of the corporation. And I've been with the company 26 years. About a year and a half ago, he came out with our first corporate credo. And that credo talks about who we are as a company and what our obligations are and how we are to interact with others. And if I were to kind of summarize it in one sentence, it's that Verizon is committed to doing the right thing. It tells employees that you don't only come to work, you show up and you give 110%. You put the customer first, and when you deal with your customers, your competitors, your vendors, and your fellow employees, you deal with them with honesty and integrity and fairness. And this ties in later to the privacy compliance program that I'm going to talk about. But so they got this message coming down from our CEO, and he spent a lot of time and money rolling this out. And every time he gets before the employee body, he reserves 5 to 10 minutes of his presentation to talk about our culture. So it's continually reinforced with us. And all of the senior leadership team, when they get before the body, they do the same thing. Now, underneath this credo, the next step down is our code of conduct, which is very, very detailed and gets into what we should and shouldn't do as employees. And employees are required to review it annually and certify that they understand it and they're going to comply with it. And there are specific sections in there devoted to privacy compliance, protecting our IT assets, making sure that we're taking care of our customer records and our employee records. And so I guess the idea behind this is that, we want to make sure that the ship is sailing in the right direction, their oars are all going the same way, and that we recognize where the dangers are in the water. So that leads into now the corporate governance. So the board is responsible for corporate governance of Verizon. And underneath that, we have the audit committee. And the audit committee has a lot of responsibilities, but one of them is to make sure that the organization has a process for identifying threats and addressing those threats. And so it's no surprise that under the audit committee, we have enterprise risk management. We call it business risk management in Verizon. And that's headed by our internal audit department, and they go out twice per year across the corporation talking to all the department heads about what are the threats they're seeing that Verizon faces and how are we addressing those threats. And what the end product of this is a one-page document, 1 to 2 page document that lists the top 10 to 15 threats facing the company, and it describes the threat, what the impact could be, whether that threat is rising or stable or decreasing, and who are the senior leaders that are assigned to it, and what are the mitigation strategies to address the threat. So that information is being communicated up, and cyber risk and breach of our networks is on there every time. So what are the mitigation strategies and what's the governance around cyber risk? So we have a privacy compliance group. There's a chief Privacy Officer, who is one of the top legal people in the company. They report into the Audit Committee, and it's really a subset of our Ethics and Compliance program. Now, this Ethics and Compliance program is part of it's compliant with the federal sentencing guidelines, and it means that we have an effective program to prevent, detect, and remediate violations of law, and that we're cultivating a corporate culture that is, focuses on high ethical standards and a commitment to compliance. So it ties back to the credo in our code of conduct. Okay, so, and I get a new appreciation after hearing that last panel, the things that this group has to face in terms of how complex their job must really be with all these different states and federal laws that come out and all these different things that we have to comply with. But that's what their job is. It's a proactive and reactive program, proactive in the sense that they have to stay abreast of all these laws. They have to make sure that we have the proper processes and controls in place to comply with them. They communicate that information back to the employee body. They have enterprise-wide training programs to make sure employees know what they're doing. It's reactive in the sense that we have toll-free hotlines where people can call if there are suspected violations, and the Chief Privacy Officer is given the resources to quickly address any potential violations that we have, and take disciplinary action where warranted. That's a key component of this. Now, I guess the other key area that I think it gets to the heart of what we do in the IT area is we have a corporate policy statement on information security. And in general terms, it basically covers broad principles that, we need to protect our information assets, which consists of our, the equipment, the applications, the programs, the data. But the key part of this policy is that it establishes an executive security council that consists of the top people in our company, our general counsel, our chief information officer, our chief security officer, the heads of our network security for wireless and wireline, and our chief security, our head network security person for our internal networks. And their job is to guide, direct, and oversee the carrying out of this policy. Now, they have, all the resources. These are the top guys, so they can pull the purse strings and they can put, the people in. We have entire organizations devoted to carrying this out. We have an 85-page corporate policy instruction that falls underneath this policy, and it covers the IT security area from soup to nuts, anything from who can access our buildings and how we grant access, who can access our programs, how we outsource, how we deal with third parties, what we do with business continuity, emergency response, data encryption, all that stuff is covered there. And it's overseen at a very high level and reporting up to the audit committee. So when you look at Verizon and governance, we have this communication to the employee body, creating an awareness, and then you have this oversight, that senior management commitment, starting with the audit committee and then with the senior managers with enterprise risk management, privacy compliance, and this corporate policy on information security.
Renee, you want to go next?
Sure. Well, that's overwhelming. Just to be really honest, that's overwhelming. Kimpton Hotels, and we have 58 hotels, 62 restaurants. We are not the size of Verizon and Microsoft by any stretch of the imagination, but our cyber risk keeps me up at night, especially after I have a conversation with our IT department and find out what they're talking about, and they didn't let me in yet. So corporate governance at Kimpton is kind of a new term for us. I think everybody knows what it is, but Kimpton's a culture of entrepreneurial operation and not big on dictating down from a corporate level. So this has been, as we've grown and partnered with publicly traded companies, it's become even more important to us. So our audit committee has been more and more involved in giving direction and requiring that our IT department put together internal controls and procedures to make sure that we are, stepping up and paying attention. We did put a chief privacy officer position in place. Unfortunately, she left last week, so we're looking for a new one. But also that the IT department is now required to talk to risk management when they're going to delve into things, cloud. My newest favorite, let's put iPads in every hotel room. That's my new favorite. But I could tell you horror stories about what that creates for us. But operationally, for when you're running hotels and restaurants, the whole idea is we've got to make a profit, we've got to keep moving, we've got to respond to the guest needs. And I think all of us are challenged with that because it's all about responding to the client, it's all about responding to the customer and to the guest. And so corporate governance sometimes doesn't win out over the response to the guests. And it doesn't, it can get sidelined, unfortunately, only until the claim happens. And then everybody wants to know, what did we do, and how did we do it, and how did we miss that? And so it's going to be a little bit challenging as we go forward in our organization to get our IT people on board, to get the structure in place. I just want to copy and paste everything you have, Dave. But we're working on it, and we pay attention to it and are aware of it. But it's not that easy. And I think that more often than not, we'll find that companies the size of Kimpton Hotels and Restaurants, or even slightly bigger, struggle with these things when they need to respond constantly to the operational needs of the organization. So that's about what I have to say about that. You're on now, Eric.
Is this working? Yep. Well, I'd have to say thanks, Renee, and thanks, Dave. I'd have to say, I think our story around corporate governance is very similar to Verizon. We have, underneath the board of directors, there's 4 committees. One of those is the audit committee. And the responsibility for that group is to really evaluate and understand what those risks are and to, understand the magnitude of those concerns. What I'd like to do is maybe talk a little bit more about specifically our group within the Treasury Risk Organization, give you a little background, a little flavor. I think you've heard a lot about kind of the governance, which was great, and thanks, Dave. Within the Treasury Risk Group, we have our 2 different areas. One of those is business risk management, and that's the piece that I'm part of, roughly 7 or 8 people. The other side is financial risk management. And the Financial Risk Management Group deals with VAR, which is value at risk analysis of the basically the cash portfolio that Microsoft carries. And then on the business risk side, on our side, we're responsible for the insurance and the loss control for the various risks across the Microsoft organization. So my manager, direct manager, is Lori Jorgensen, and she reports up through the treasurer, and then we report up through the CFO.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Sarah, anything you want to add or subtract? Okay.
A lot of good different perspectives.
Great. Yeah, I love the perspectives that we have here. So Renee, maybe we'll go to you next. And on calls that we had talked about risk control and some of the thoughts that you had around that. Why don't we take the conversation to risk control, and we'll start with Renee, and then go to Eric, and then jump back to Dave.
Well, some of the risk control aspects for hotels and restaurants can be very, very challenging. We struggle with the bring your own device because we're entrepreneurial. We have a lot of people who bring their own iPhones, bring their own iPads, bring their own laptops and say, hey, IT, hook me up. That's a big problem and a big challenge for us because we do have an encryption requirement with our laptops and with our iPhones provided by the company. Unfortunately, we'll also let you log into email from your own phone. And that poses issues because those aren't necessarily as secure as the phones that the company is providing you and is setting up for you. We've gone to encryption on our laptops, which makes me really, really happy. But one of my biggest issues on risk control is contracts. And I know we're going to talk about cloud in a minute, but indemnification in contracts with providers. Sarah had brought up mobile apps. One of my biggest hair-raising stories was working with our mobile app developer, and it was 2 guys in a basement going to do Kimpton's mobile app, and we talked about what information was going to be provided on this mobile app, and these guys had no insurance. They had nothing. They just had their brains and, their IT know-how. And you get a lot of pushback from operations when, it makes economic sense to use somebody that's cheap and, they don't have the overhead of insurance. And so it takes telling the stories of, let me tell you what can happen when things go wrong. Let's talk about the latest breach off of a mobile app. Let's talk about the latest breach for a hotel company. But somehow those don't even ring true until it happens to us. And that unfortunately should not be the driver, but I'm sure you guys have all seen it in business. Sometimes nobody pays attention until the claim actually happens. And I'm trying to get away from that theme. Mobile apps have been an issue for us. One of the things that we've talked about doing is for risk control is an actual penetration test, and to determine whether or not we have vulnerabilities. The IT and legal departments are very heavily involved in that, but that's kind of where we're at with that. It's very difficult to control when you've got operations now all over the world. And understand where you have all of those vulnerabilities, where our chief privacy officer had to get up to speed on the Euro issues and those new requirements and how they impact us when we have sales offices in various countries in Europe and South America. And nobody had really thought, oh my gosh, now we have all these other laws to comply with as well as 50 different state laws. It's kind of a nightmare when you have to think about that. So we're spending a lot of time on talking about how best can we control this. I think it's an evolution that's going to be going on forever. So I think my job's safe for now.
Eric?
Yeah, I just continue some of those comments around the applications. As we've moved through Windows 7 and we're coming up quickly on the Windows 8 launch and the Windows Mobile launch. We've seen from a risk management standpoint a lot of activity in signing up these developers, like you were talking about, Renee. These are garage shops, 1-2 people, and the business is really fast and furious trying to get these guys on board. And our role in risk management is to maybe have them step back and say, hey, is this an appropriate vendor? Are there other options we can take? Do they have the insurance? What are the indemnities? Really walking them through the process, because again, the business kind of they go at a light speed, and to be able to have them step back and say, okay, maybe this isn't the right decision for Microsoft, and maybe there is another option. So I definitely appreciate that. Some of the other areas when I think about risk control, loss control, we've spent a lot of time. We're very engaged on the property side as well. Over the years, and kind of engaging with our third-party vendors and looking at our facilities. And more recently, over the last 7 or 8 years, as we've built out our data center presence, we've spent considerable time on the loss control side and kind of looking at those facilities and making sure that they're adequately protected from a fire standpoint, and there's redundancy, and that our customers can get the information that they need at the time when they need it. I think another point here is, it's not only risk management, our role, but also it's an opportunity for the businesses themselves and the product developers to really embed this loss control mentality into what we'll call the software development lifecycle, and to make sure that they're thinking through, again, kind of the decisions they make are impacting the product that we're going to deliver to our customers.
I don't have a whole lot more to add than, we face the same struggles that you do. From a risk control standpoint, when we're controlling, the risk of, data breach and that kind of stuff, that's really our IT organizations that are putting in all the controls. Where we get involved, certainly we have to understand, what's being done so that we can kind of assess how much insurance, we may want to buy and that kind of thing. But where we tend to get involved is new products that come through. We're asked to look at the contracts and the indemnities, and also the insurance requirements that we're imposing on our vendors. We have the small vendors too, and sometimes we're viewed as the roadblock to the process. And and even when we're trying to sell to customers, the same thing. When we want to have, certain insurance requirements. We're seeing, well, the sales guys want to make the sale, and we want to make sure that the risk is adequately controlled. So that's where we struggle a little bit. And what we're seeing in some of these new areas that we're getting into is that the customers are starting to push back a little bit, and they want us to take their liability on. And I think we'll probably talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. So, BYOD, bring your own device, and just mobile in general is a game changer in terms of risk. And from an IT security standpoint, I remember when I rolled out my first IT system, I was dealing with the decision of, do I really give employees email? Okay. Now it's okay, everybody has email, but everybody has an iPad, everybody has an iPod, everybody has a smartphone. And I think it might have been the last June event or the event before, somebody left a laptop or an iPad, and we had to let everybody know there's a missing iPad in the room. If it's you, come get it. And so I'm sure that was one of those where nobody came forward and got until later. But there are certain people in the room who were thinking, oh, we just generated some business. And so there's so many different technologies that are disruptive, right? And from a risk standpoint, they're disruptive because of what they do and how they do it. And I'm going to, I'll go to cloud next because that's my passion, and a lot of you have asked me to go there, and I've kind of prepped everybody here just to let them know. And so here's my canned question. Forrester recently reported that the cloud services market is valued at $20 billion, with an expected growth to $240 billion over the next 8 to 10 years. As both providers of cloud services and users of cloud services, please share with us how cloud has impacted you as risk managers. Eric, you want to go first?
Sure. So I kind of broke this out into, thinking about cloud strategy into 2 buckets, at least internal here to Microsoft. And, from my perspective, our role with regards to cloud is, one, to find ways to help support the business in growing the cloud area. And that's really important because it's a key bet for us over the next, 10, 15, 20 years. And then the second bullet is really to understand what the risks are in the cloud space and build out risk financing programs to help mitigate that potential risk. My first bullet, in talking about kind of helping to support the business, we've done some work from a contractual standpoint to try to alleviate some of those discussions that we have with customers and try to make it as seamless as possible, so that we can close out more deals as related to cloud. And again, kind of on the back end, making sure that we have broader corporate programs at a catastrophic level, and then also at a business level to ensure that we can cover the risk.
Great. Dave, you want to go next?
So we started looking at cyber insurance, I think about 5 years ago. That's when I started it started to come onto our radar. And we were bringing in brokers to kind of talk to them. And at that point, we weren't convinced we really needed a whole lot of insurance, because the insurance product hadn't evolved to the point where we thought, it was worth our while to actually buy a separate cyber policy. And I guess, so we were looking at it once or twice per year, but it was still on our radar. It really began to pick up the past 2 years, where I could tell you that the level of activity has maybe quadrupled in terms of the time we spend in this area, looking at this risk and how we're going to finance it and things like that. And I think it isn't so much cloud, because when you talk to our IT people, they'll tell you that, well, we've been offering this type of service even before, the people started calling it cloud, and it may be, the technology may be a little bit different, and it's not really as risky as you read about. There's a perception that it's riskier, but it really isn't. What's really caused us to become more involved in this area is basically just, I think, 2 things. One, it's really, I get 3 emails a day on cyber webinars and cloud computing, articles to read, and so
I only send 2 of those.
So the media attention has really caused a lot more hype in this area. So that's one thing. So it causes everyone to say, hey, maybe we ought to be doing something here. But then I think the second thing is that as a company, we have been expanding our level of risk, because in 2005 we purchased MCI, got us into the business area. 2007 we purchased CyberTrust, it's an IT security company, and then last year Terramark. And we're aggressively moving into this area. So as we go from here to here, in terms of doing business with large businesses and cloud computing and all that kind of stuff, our level of concern, our level of risk goes up, and we need to pay more attention to it.
So I got a primer from our IT people on cloud services, and one of the things I found interesting was the discussion relative to our payroll services benefits that are already being handled through the cloud. And I took an opportunity to look at the contract that we had 5 years ago with that provider, which had a pretty strong indemnification. It had really good language, and I felt, and so did council, felt that our indemnity was really strong. Interestingly enough, we just renewed that contract, and the indemnification has gotten murky and less strong. And some of that, I think, is because this evolution of the cloud, maybe people are getting a little bit more leery about what they're going to be responsible for in the event of that data breach. And if our employee payroll, which is all that sensitive information, their social security numbers, their addresses, whatnot, is residing with the payroll vendor, their benefits information all residing with the payroll vendor, if there's a breach of that information, they're going to look to the IP address, right? Because that's where the breach happened. And whose breach is it? Is it a breach because it's our PII and we actually own that? Or is it the payroll provider's breach because it happened on their IP address? And so with the renewal of this contract, they're not as likely to take on as much indemnification as they used to, because there's more and more talk about this, and I think that people are becoming more aware of where they're exposed. The same things, we look at, is Google Mail the right thing to do for our organization? Having that conversation, understanding multi-tenants versus single dedicated, I don't even know what some of that stuff means, but my concern in talking to IT was, let's talk through a security breach. Let's talk through a data breach and really understand what's going to happen in the event that, let's not even say it's a data breach. Let's talk through any litigation at all where we're going to have a lit hold on all electronic information sent and received. And how likely are we, how comfortable are we that Google Mail is going to be able to provide that function for us? And does the, indemnification protect us in the event we go to Google and all that information isn't there, or it's been unencrypted? And a lot of people have told me, well, Google Mail is probably the most secure we could get, and we weren't going to experience the downtime, and you're outthinking this. Well, I think for the lawyers in the room, which there are plenty of, we're never really going to know until it's tested in court, are we? We're not going to know what we're exposed to. We're not going to know how bad this could be for an organization until we get to litigation on one of these cases. It's a little scary, and I'm not a big advocate of, hey, let's be first in. But a couple of our other hotel peers have gone that way, and those risk managers are also feeling a little leery about it. So cloud causes me a little unease, but I also get that it's the wave of the future, and we're probably not going to get software from a lot of the vendors. I don't think Microsoft's going to give us much software after a while. So it's the cloud or bust, and I think we just have to be ready for it.
Thanks, Renee. I think both